Hey guys, tonight we wake up in a creaky longhouse, just before sunrise, the air thick with the scent of smoldering embers, and yesterday's leftover fish stew. You blink awake to the sound of fierce whisper shouting and urgent debate, echoing off the wooden walls. You shift in your pile of furs and realize that today is not going to be one of those quiet mornings where you sneak off to stare dramatically at the fjord. No, today starts with an argument about helmet feathers. You stretch, joints cracking like dry twigs, and roll over just in time to see two shield maidens squaring off by the fire pit. One is holding up a feather so large it could double as a canoe paddle. The other points accusingly at it, her braid whipping around like an angry snake. You sigh. You probably won't survive this breakfast if you're the type who hates early morning drama. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video, and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is over there now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge over to the fire, trying to stay invisible, but one maiden jabs the feather at you like it's a sword. Tell her this is clearly more majestic. She hisses. You blink, stuck between wanting to support historical authenticity and wanting to keep your nose unbroken. Before breakfast, you mumble something about skybird inspiration, which earns you a suspicious squint. Historians still argue whether Viking Shieldmaidens actually wore helmet feathers, or if this was mostly a later romantic invention. Some believe they adorned themselves in feathers for ceremonial reasons, to intimidate enemies, or simply to one-up each other in flair. Judging by this morning's display, you lean toward the theory of pure competitive peacocking. You edge toward the stew pot, hoping to scoop some breakfast before the next duel begins. Instead, you find another shield maiden delicately adding herbs to her porridge while humming a battle song. She notices you and waves a small sprig of dill. A true warrior starts her day with strong herbs and stronger opinions, she declares. You nod sagely, stirring your own bowl, though you secretly consider whether honey might have been a safer choice. Nearby, a younger warrior starts braiding her hair with small feather tufts, each one more crooked than the last. She scowls every few seconds, muttering curses at the mirror-like shield propped against the wall. You offer to help, and she hands over the comb with the solemnity of passing a sacred sword. You hear another spat behind you. One warrior accuses her rival of stealing feathers from her helmet during the night. The accused snorts, claiming she was too busy sharpening her axe and composing new victory chants to bother with feather theft. You try not to laugh, but a snort slips out, earning you a glare sharp enough to split logs. Meanwhile, you notice a pile of half-finished helmets lined up near the doorway, each more extravagant than the next. Some have wild splashes of paint. Others are adorned with tiny charms, beads, shards of bone, and yes, more feathers. You can't help but marvel at the creativity, even if it's dangerously close to becoming a bird sanctuary. One shield maiden approaches with a helmet sporting an enormous plume that might be visible from Valhalla. She tilts her head proudly. Do you think Odin would approve? She asks. You hesitate, imagining Odin squinting down and possibly spilling his meat in surprise. You give her a careful thumbs up, which seems to satisfy her. Historians still debate whether these elaborate helmets were used in real combat or saved for ceremonies and public displays. Some say the feathers served to make warriors look taller and more intimidating, while others think they simply liked the aesthetic drama. After all, who doesn't love a good breakfast runway? You sit back down, spoon hovering over your bowl, and watch as another warrior tests the wind resistance of her helmet by running small laps around the fire pit. She nearly trips over a stray shield, then launches into an impromptu speech about how helmet aerodynamics improve spear throws. You consider taking notes for future dinner conversations. By the time you finally get a bite of stew, your mind is spinning from the swirl of feather debates, fashion theories, and personal vendettas. You close your eyes, letting the warmth of the soup seep into your bones, hoping it will fortify you for the day ahead. Outside, dawn begins to slip in, painting soft stripes of gold across the longhouse walls. You take a deep breath, knowing today will be filled with sparring, singing, feather measuring, and endless debates about helmet fashion. You wouldn't have it any other way. You finish your last spoonful of stew just in time to avoid another round of accusations flying like arrows across the room. You stand, stretch your arms to the low ceiling beams, and prepare yourself for the next morning ritual. Braiding and buckling. A line has already formed near the hearth, where one patient shield maiden acts as the resident braidmaster. She weaves hair into thick rope-like plaits that would make any modern hairstylist weep tears of envy. You take your place in line, feeling the eyes of a rival maiden burning holes into your back as she carefully separates strands and slides. In feathers of suspiciously bright colors, the shield maiden ahead of you grumbles that her helmet buckle snapped during training yesterday. She waves the battered piece of metal around like it's a war trophy. You listen, nodding sympathetically, though your attention is partly on her braids, which are so tightly wound they might actually hold small secrets inside. She insists she needs a new buckle forged by someone who understands real helmet philosophy. Historians still argue whether helmet designs were strictly functional or if they were also declarations of personality and tribal pride. Judging by this morning, you suspect they doubled as fashion statements and emotional megaphones. Your turn comes, and you sit down, feeling the gentle tugging on your scalp. The braidmaster hums a low, ancient tune, punctuating each loop and twist with a satisfied grunt. You imagine each knot echoing through your skull like a quiet drum, connecting you to the long line of shield maidens before you. You hear a stifled giggle behind you. Someone's helmet feather has just toppled into a bowl of fish broth. You stifle a laugh too, the sound vibrating in your chest like a secret drum beat. Once braided, you move to the buckle station, where warriors are busy polishing their metal fittings until they gleam like captured stars. You run your thumb over your own buckle, noting the tiny etchings of spirals and runes. You polish it with a scrap of wool, each stroke an affirmation that today's arguments will be fought with dignity, or at least extra sparkle. Nearby, a cluster of shield maidens are already whispering fiercely. They're comparing helmet feather lengths over bowls of lukewarm porridge, as if they're measuring sword blades. One points out that taller feathers catch the morning light better. Another counters that shorter feathers resist the wind and reduce helmet drag. You imagine a Viking version of a Formula One pit crew, analyzing helmet airflow while scribbling runic charts on goat parchment. You squeeze past them, careful not to spill your polished buckle into the communal honeypot. The chatter grows louder. Someone claims she saw a rival using imported peacock feathers, which, if true, would be scandalous beyond belief. Historians still argue whether Viking women actually had access to exotic feathers, or if these stories arose from traders embellishing tales to sell expensive goods. You imagine a sly merchant boasting, "Ah, yes, these are Odin-approved celestial bird feathers," while secretly plucking them from a confused barn chicken. You finally secure your buckle and stand up, adjusting the weight of your helmet against your braid. The morning light filters through the cracks in the longhouse, catching on the feathers so they glow like odd fiery halos above each warrior's head. You step toward the exit, pausing to help a younger maiden whose buckle refuses to clasp. She groans dramatically, cursing the blacksmith's entire ancestry and threatening to wear a cabbage on her head instead. You offer to hold the feather while she wrestles with the stubborn metal, and she thanks you with a fierce nod. You slip outside for a moment, savoring the cold kiss of the morning air against your freshly braided hair. Your helmet feels slightly too snug today, perhaps swollen with pride, or just too many ambitious feathers jammed in all directions. You spot a pair of shield maidens practicing helmet poses, tilting their heads, adjusting chin angles, and debating which stance looks most vel. You giggle, nearly snorting into your wool collar. Historians still argue whether these breakfast debates served as pre-battle psychological preparation, or simply as a communal bonding ritual to strengthen loyalty and boost morale. You suspect the truth is buried somewhere between pride and parody. You glance back inside and see more warriors gathering around the fire, braids shining like rippling rivers of midnight oil. The air smells of toasted oats, damp wool, and a hint of honey. Someone starts strumming a crude lyre, humming a battle song turned into a silly feather anthem. You hum along softly, feeling each note dance down your spine. You tuck your buckle firmly, check your helmet one last time, and take a deep breath. You're ready for whatever squabbles and eventual laughs the day will bring. The morning sun slices across the horizon, bright and bold as a battle cry, promising mischief, mock duels, and endless declarations about whose feather truly reigns supreme. You shuffle back into the longhouse just in time to witness a scene that looks like a cross between a feast prep and a feather massacre. Baskets of berries, blackberries, elderberries, and even a handful of questionable red ones are strewn across the long table, staining every available hand purple and blue. A small group of shield maidens is furiously mashing them into a pulp, chattering excitedly about dye intensities, saturation techniques, and the eternal question, matte or glossy. You slide up cautiously, picking up a berry and sniffing it as though it might attack. One warrior catches your eye and smirks, planning to join the fashion elite. She teases, brandishing a bowl of deep indigo dye, like it's a prized trophy. You grin and toss the berry into the bowl, feeling it squish between your fingers. A squish that echoes all the questionable choices you're about to make with your helmet feather. Historians still argue whether these bright feather dyes were actually used or if shield maidens stuck to more natural, muted colors. You suspect that, if they could get away with neon pink, they absolutely would have. After all, nothing screams fear me like a warrior charging at you wearing a helmet plume. Next to the dye bowl, you spot a pile of pillowcases in various states of destruction. Feathers poke out like mischievous hedgehog spines. One warrior triumphantly pulls a particularly large pillow apart, scattering feathers like snow in a winter squall. Victory, she cries. You nearly choke laughing. It dawns on you that last night's pillow raids were more than a prank, they were covert feather collection missions. Brilliant. If slightly cruel to anyone hoping for a restful night, someone shouts from the far end of the longhouse that the best feathers come from geese, not ravens, because they hold dye better. A rival snorts in disbelief, declaring that raven feathers carry the spirit of night and look more intimidating in moonlight. Another joins in, arguing that owl feathers provide the best aerodynamic balance during shield charges. You wonder if you should suggest chicken feathers. Just to watch the collective meltdown, you volunteer to help stir the dye, grabbing a wooden spoon and carefully turning the berry mush into a glossy, thick ink. The smell is surprisingly sweet, and you catch yourself daydreaming about dyeing pancakes instead. You push that dangerous thought away before someone accuses you of sabotage. A shield maiden nearby delicately dips a feather into the bowl, holding it high like a wizard conjuring a new spell. The color drips down in slow rivulets, and she watches, mesmerized. She turns to you with wide eyes. Imagine storming the enemy gates with this under the moonlight, she whispers. You nod seriously, though inside, you can't stop picturing her tripping over her own braid mid-charge. Historians still argue whether these dyeing sessions were practical group activities or elaborate bonding performances meant to show unity and creativity. You figure it's both. Where else can you bond over war strategy and stain each other's noses purple at the same time? One young warrior holds up a feather so dark it gleams like spilled ink, declaring she will only wear feathers blessed under the stars. Another claims she only accepts feathers from pillows, stolen in personal duels, each theft commemorated in a poem. You consider writing your own epic about a particularly stubborn chicken from last week, but decide to keep that one private for now. Eventually, the dye bowls start to empty, and the air is thick with that earthy, fruity scent of crushed berries and damp wool. You help gather the finished feathers, laying them out to dry on a wide wooden plank. The warriors gather around, critiquing each other's choices in a flurry of good-natured insults and exaggerated gasps. Someone declares one feather so bright it might be visible from Valhalla. Another laughs that she'd need a shield twice her size to balance out the flamboyance. You glance over your shoulder to see a shield maiden sneaking an extra pillow under her tunic. You catch her eye, and she freezes. Then, with a mischievous grin, she bolts for the door, feathers cascading in her wake like a bizarre bridal train. You laugh so hard your shoulders shake, leaning on the dye table to keep from falling over. As the dye session winds down, a quiet hush settles. Warriors inspect their handiwork, run fingers across soft plumes, and exchange knowing glances that speak of tomorrow's dramatic helmet reveals. You stack the empty berry baskets, wiping your stained hands on a nearby fur scrap that now looks like it hosted a midnight fruit festival. Finally, you take a step back, surveying the colorful chaos, the feathers shimmering under the morning light, the dice-splattered floor, and the triumphant smirks on every face. You inhale deeply, feeling that odd warmth rise in your chest, the knowledge that you're part of something loud, messy, and endlessly creative. Tomorrow, there will be more debates, more boasts, and certainly more feathers stuck in unlikely places. But tonight, you'll dream of giant birds, berry rivers, and helmets so bold they might make even Thor blush. The longhouse air feels almost electric now, thick with berry-stained excitement and the echo of feather squabbles. You step outside into the crisp morning light, hoping for a moment of peace before the next inevitable chaos. Instead, you're greeted by the rhythmic thud of wooden shields colliding. The morning practice fights have begun. A circle has formed in the training yard, warriors dancing around each other with all the grace and ferocity of storm-swept seabirds. You slip closer, careful to avoid a stray shield bash to the ribs. Nearby, a warrior with a half-painted helmet feather perched proudly on her braid shouts, encouragement and critiques in equal measure. Historians still argue whether these practice fights were daily routines for all shield maidens or reserved for specific ceremonial days. Watching the determined squints, the flying braids, and the sweaty glares, you decide they probably took every chance to brawl, partly for skill, partly for sport, and definitely for bragging rights over breakfast. As you watch, a warrior with a shimmering purple-dyed feather charges forward, shouting something about honoring the goose spirits. Her opponent counters with a low sweep, nearly toppling her, and the crowd erupts in cheers and cackles. You can't help but laugh when the purple-feathered warrior rolls backward, springs to her feet, and points accusingly. Your helmet feather looks like a half-plucked crow, she screeches. A chorus of gasps and scandalized giggles fills the air. You rub your forehead, trying not to laugh too loudly. Another warrior mutters beside you that insulting someone's feather is basically the ultimate betrayal, right after stealing someone's favorite comb. You file that away for future survival tips. Between matches, small groups form around the practice yard, exchanging juicy gossip in hushed, conspiratorial tones. You drift over, eavesdropping with the subtlety of a seagull, eyeing an unattended sandwich. One warrior claims she heard about a distant village where shield maidens wear feathers dyed in seaweed, ink so potent it makes enemies weep from 20 paces away. Another swears she saw a helmet feather so long it brushed the rafters every time its wearer entered a longhouse. Historians still argue whether these exaggerated helmet stories were truth, legend, or drunken boasts, repeated so often they became fact. You suspect all three, and you're honestly here for it. Nearby, a warrior dabs berry dye onto her cheeks, claiming it makes her look more moon-blessed in battle. Another tries to outdo her by sticking tiny shell fragments into her braid. You imagine them mid-fight, feathers flailing and shells clinking, looking more like a traveling circus than a war band. You grin at the thought, stifling a snort. A sudden clash of shields draws your attention back to the center. Two warriors face off, each helmet adorned with feathers so extravagant they look like parade floats gone rogue. One feints left, then swings her shield low, sending her opponent stumbling backward. In the scuffle, a bright green feather detaches and drifts to the ground like a tiny, defiant flag. The warrior snatches it up mid-motion and jabs it into her opponent's helmet gap before finishing the charge. The onlookers burst into shrieks of laughter, some clutching their sides, others rolling on the ground. You double over, tears streaming down your cheeks, breath coming in short, delighted gasps. The victorious warrior bows grandly, helmet feather now sporting an accidental new color accent. You catch sight of a young warrior practicing footwork. Alone at the edge of the yard, her helmet still feathered. You wander over, offering a gentle nod of encouragement. She sighs, confesses she's afraid her feather choice will look too showy or not fierce enough. You listen patiently, then suggest she wear whatever feather makes her feel like she can outrun even Odin on a bad day. Her eyes light up, and she cracks a shy, crooked smile before launching back into her drills with renewed energy. Historians still argue whether helmet embellishments were more for intimidation or perhaps a blend of both. You stand there, watching, feeling like you're witnessing an entire language spoken without words. Each feather a syllable in a shared song of defiance and delight. As the sparring matches wind down, the warriors gather to gulp water and share victorious retellings of their most theatrical blows. One maiden claims her helmet feather gave her divine balance mid-spin. Another insists her opponent's feathers blinded her with otherworldly radiance. You lean back against a fence post, the laughter and boastful jests echoing in your bones. Mingling with the gentle sea breeze curling through your hair, you close your eyes, replaying the swirl of flying feathers and clashing shields, your mind adrift in a soft, colorful haze. Tomorrow, the helmets will be repainted, the feathers and the insults rehearsed anew. But for now, you savor the warmth of sun and laughter, the sweet sting of berry dye still under your fingernails, and the gentle certainty that you're part of something gloriously chaotic and endlessly alive. You slip away from the practice yard just as a fresh argument erupts over who actually landed the most elegant blow. You make your way to a side bench near the longhouse, wiping berry dye off your wrists and breathing in the calm, or at least, as calm as it gets, in a yard echoing with boasts about helmet feathers. A warrior plops down next to you with a heavy sigh, shoving a wooden cup into your hand. You sniff it cautiously. Mead, warm, slightly sour, with that sweet honey edge that makes you feel bold enough to shout poetry at the moon. You take a tentative sip, feeling the warmth spill down your throat and settle in your belly like a tiny sundot. She nudges you with her elbow. Best to drink now before the morning complaints start up again? She warns, her grin sharp enough to split a shield. You raise an eyebrow. She rolls her eyes dramatically, pointing toward the longhouse door, where a line of warriors stands, waiting to re-enter, each helmet feather flopping around like restless chickens. Historians still argue whether mead was a morning drink for shieldmaidens, or reserved strictly for victory feasts. Watching them sip casually, you suspect they didn't need much excuse. Besides, debating helmet aerodynamics is thirsty work. Another warrior saunters over, helmet under her arm, hair still wet from a quick wash at the stream. She flops down on the ground and starts ranting about her helmet's airflow failures, swearing it slowed her shield pivot. You nearly choke on your mead, trying to stifle a laugh. Someone else butts in, insisting that lighter feathers improve head agility but come at the tragic cost of looking less dramatic during a charge. You look around, realizing the entire group has devolved into a heated design panel. One maiden insists that helmet feathers should match seasonal berry colors to stay connected to the earth, while another claims feathers should be dyed to match the warrior's mood, a dangerous proposition if you wake up grumpy and end up looking like an angry goose. Historians still argue whether helmet feathers were purely aesthetic or if they served subtle, psychological functions, making enemies second-guess your sanity. Perhaps you can't help but wonder if the real purpose was simply to keep mornings like these endlessly entertaining. You take another sip of mead, its warmth now mixing with the low hum of morning chatter. One warrior insists her helmet talks to her during battle, offering guidance on whether to dodge left or swing high. Another claims her feathers allow her to hear enemy arrows coming sooner. You raise your eyebrows so high it nearly disappears into your hairline. She nods vigorously, eyes wide with that mystical certainty only mead and morning frost can inspire. Suddenly, a warrior charges in holding a battered helmet like a crime scene trophy. She thrusts it into the circle, yelling about how someone borrowed her prized feather while she was busy rehearsing a new shield spin move. Gasps ripple through the group. Accusations fly faster than arrows. You duck slightly, half expecting someone to throw a mead cup in outrage. A nearby warrior starts giggling uncontrollably, accidentally snorting mead through her nose. You slap your hand over your mouth, trying to hold back, but it's no use. The laughter spreads like wildfire, rolling across the group until even the accuser doubles over. Feather rage momentarily forgotten in the face of shared absurdity. Historians still debate whether Viking communal bonds were strengthened more by combat or by shared moments like this, messy, loud, and soaked in mead. Watching the warriors now, you'd bet on the latter. One warrior suggests a helmet beauty pageant to finally settle all feather disputes. Cheers erupt. Another proposes a mead relay race where helmets must be worn throughout the event, even during the inevitable rolling into mud finale. You nod thoughtfully. That might be the only way to decide whose helmet truly reigns supreme. You lean back, mead in hand, the crisp air tingling against your cheeks. The morning sun crawls higher, catching glimmers on helmet feathers now scattered around like exotic birds molting after a rough festival. You spot a warrior gently braiding her helmet strap, humming a quiet lullaby to it like a mother to a cranky toddler. Another warrior uses her feather as a pretend spoon to scoop invisible stew from an imaginary pot, prompting another round of giggles. As the laughter subsides into soft murmurs, you feel the warmth in your belly echo out into your chest, a gentle thrum of belonging. The rivalry, the constant complaints about helmet designs, and the endless preening feel less like conflict and more like a living, breathing tapestry, each thread chaotic yet beautifully woven. You tilt your head back, catching a final sip of mead, and let the breeze comb through your hair. Tomorrow, they'll argue anew, feathers will be lost, dyes will stain every surface, and someone will definitely accuse another of helmet sabotage. But for now, wrapped in honey warmth and morning light, you are exactly where you're meant to be, perched at the edge of wild sisterhood, half warrior, half feathered poet. You shuffle away from the mead circle, the laughter and honey warmth still buzzing pleasantly in your ears. As you round the corner of the longhouse, a new commotion greets you, the unmistakable sound of a boastful arrival. You squint into the sun and spot a group of Shieldmaidens cresting the hill, striding like queens of some moonlit saga. They are from a neighboring village, famous or infamous, depending on whom you ask, for their audacious helmet designs and rumored feather cult. The lead warrior sports a towering plume so extravagant it might double as a traveling tent if rain breaks out. You watch in awe as it waves gently in the breeze, catching the light like a proud peacock. Historians still argue whether Viking helmet visitors brought new design ideas as genuine cultural exchanges, or if it was more like an early form of fashion espionage. Watching the glances around you now, a mixture of admiration, horror, and mild existential crisis, you'd guess it was a bit of both. Your own group rushes forward to greet them, but the tone is less welcome hug and more unofficial fashion duel at dawn. The visiting Shieldmaidens line up, each helmet feather taller, shinier, and more audacious than the last. You catch your breath, tilting your head to take it all in. One feather glints so brightly it could guide lost ships to shore. Another is dyed in a swirl of colors, so hypnotic you nearly forget your own name. A local warrior tugs at your sleeve, her eyes wide with alarm. They used imported feathers, she hisses. I heard they even dipped them in star moss for extra glow. You nod solemnly, though inside you're trying not to burst out laughing. One visitor steps forward, her feather curving gracefully like a moonsicle. She flicks her braid and lets out a casual, nice helmets, ... very minimalist. A collective, GASP, rattles the yard. You feel your mouth drop open slightly, your mind scrambling to translate the polite insult. It lands somewhere between adorable effort and good luck at the village bake sale. A local warrior snaps back, at least we don't need feather stilts to look fierce. The air grows thick, as if Thor himself paused mid-hammer swing to listen in. You sense that at any moment, someone might challenge someone else to a helm-off, involving dramatic poses, improvised poetry, or both. Historians still debate whether these confrontations ever escalated into actual feather duels, or stayed firmly in the realm of words and glares. You're certain they at least produced enough drama to fill long winter nights with retelings, each time with taller feathers and even taller tails. A group forms a tight circle around the newcomers. You get nudged forward and suddenly find yourself front row to an impromptu feather showcase. Each visiting warrior tips her head, spins slowly, then strikes a final pose as if awaiting an applause that only seals on distant shores can hear. You clap politely, though your brain hums with thoughts like how does she keep that balanced? And could she survive a windy day without taking flight? Nearby, one local Shieldmaiden snatches up a dull gray feather, raises it high, and yells, "We value subtlety here." Another starts a sarcastic chant. Gray is the new black. Gray is the new black. You snicker, clutching your stomach as your laughter spills out uncontrollably. The visiting warriors pretend to be scandalized, clutching imaginary pearls and fanning themselves with dainty motions. A few even dramatically stagger backward, as if mortally wounded by the idea of wearing anything less than celestial-grade plumage. You nearly collapse from the hilarity, your sides aching from the morning's growing collection of comedic insults. One bold local steps forward and proposes a feather endurance test. Wearing the helmet while running a circuit around the village pond without losing a single plume. Cheers erupt, echoing against the hills. The visiting leader arches an eyebrow, but accepts with an amused shrug, as though she's been waiting her whole life for this particular challenge. Historians still argue whether competitions like these were real or just village lore that ballooned into local legend. You don't care either way. Right now, it feels more thrilling and ridiculous than any saga sung in smoky halls. Helmets are strapped tight, feathers preened for battle, and the runners take off like startled geese, each wobbling with the added height. You watch, breath held, as feathers tremble and teeter. The first warrior slips halfway through the course and rolls into a gooseberry bush, emerging with feathers bent at odd angles and a victorious grin that says, "Totally worth it." The yard explodes with cheers, jeers, and tearful laughter. One elder warrior wipes her eyes and croaks, "This is better than any mead-fueled dream I've ever had." You nod, agreeing completely. By the time the last runner staggers across the line, helmets askew and feathers resembling collapsed scarecrows, you feel your chest buzzing with joy. You realize that, whether for pride, strategy, or just plain mischief, these helmet feathers have become more than ornaments. They are declarations of spirit, little wings of defiance against the gray churn of daily life. You step back, breathing in deeply, and let the rising sun catch the laughter on your face. Tomorrow's battles can wait. Today belongs to feathers, rivalry, and the simple, spectacular joy of taking yourself just unseriously enough to feel truly alive. The yard has transformed into a post-battle festival of bent feathers, grass stains, and triumphant war cries, softened by giggles. You wander through the sea of helmet carnage, sidestepping dropped buckles and discarded straps that look like the aftermath of a very chaotic bird migration. A group of Shieldmaidens cluster around a makeshift table near the longhouse. Jars of sticky pigment lined up like soldiers awaiting orders. You slip closer and find them mixing helmet paints, each concoction brighter and bolder than the last. One warrior stirs a shimmering blue paste with such intensity it looks like she's conjuring a sea god from the depths. She lifts her brush, dramatically, eyes wide with artistic fervor. "This," she declares, "will terrify enemies and attract only the most emotionally intelligent ravens." You nearly drop your helmet laughing, imagining a bird support group showing up mid-battle to complement her emotional growth. Historians still argue whether Vikings decorated helmets with paint to signal rank, intimidate foes, or simply to show off during festivals and marketplaces. Judging by this scene, you're convinced at least half of it was pure flex. Warriors expressing their inner sparkle with as much sass as possible. Another shield maiden holds up a jar of bright crimson, boasting that she derived it from the blood of fallen berries. A friend beside her swoons dramatically, muttering about how berry sacrifices must be honored properly. You glance around, half expecting an altar of squished fruit somewhere nearby. You get roped into helping, of course. You're handed a small brush and a helmet that already looks like it lost a wrestling match with a rainbow. You dab carefully, tracing spirals and feather-like streaks along the sides. The helmet's owner peers at your work with a critical squint before nodding solemnly and declaring, "Yes," ferocious yet sophisticated. You bow with exaggerated reverence, nearly tripping over a rogue pot of ochre paste. Suddenly, someone nearby yells, "Incoming sabotage." You whip your head around just in time to see a young warrior sprinting across the yard, trailing a dripping paintbrush and cackling like a mischievous forest sprite. She leaps onto a rival's helmet, smearing a streak of bright green across the once pristine surface. The victim gasps in horror before bursting into laughter, wrestling her to the ground in a colorful, squirming pile. A few steps away, two warriors fiercely argue whether metallic shimmer paint gives extra confidence during duels or simply distracts opponents by reflecting the sun. You hear one say, "The shimmer is my inner glow made visible." You snort so hard you nearly fling blue paint onto your own boots. Historians still argue whether these helmet designs held ritual significance or were just creative outlets for otherwise serious fighters. Looking around, you can't imagine how anyone could be that serious while covered in berry dye, stray feathers, and shimmering sparkles. You step back to admire the drying helmets lined up like a bizarre bird parade. One sports a swirling storm motif, another looks like it's been kissed repeatedly by a clumsy rainbow. You catch glimpses of tiny rune etchings nestled under the paint, secret messages that might be spells, love notes, or simply inside jokes only understood by the wearer. Someone thrusts a jar of crushed shell paste into your hands, urging you to add a moonlit edge to a helmet rim. You accept, feeling a strange pride bubble up inside you as you dab away, each tiny line a quiet rebellion against drabness. The helmet's owner watches in absolute awe, as if you're sculpting the universe itself onto her forehead protector. A sudden hush falls across the group. You turn and see two shield maidens approaching each other, each helmet a riot of colors and feathers so large they look ready to take flight. The tension is thick enough to slice with a wooden spoon. They circle one another, scrutinizing paint, details, feather curls, and chin strap symmetry. Then, in a move so sudden, you nearly drop your jar, they embrace, cackling and yelling, "We're swapping tomorrow anyway." The entire yard erupts into relieved cheers, some collapsing into each other's arms, others slapping each other on the back, relieved to know actual brawls broke out. You breathe again, realizing you'd been holding your breath like a fish stuck In shallow tide pools, historians still argue whether helmet swaps between warriors symbolized alliances, friendships, or simply a chance to show off more styles without committing to one design. Watching this display, you suspect it's about freedom, a chance to step into someone else's story for a day. By now, helmets glitter in the sun like freshly caught fish, each one loud, proud, and utterly unique. You wipe your stained hands on your tunic, feeling oddly accomplished. Tomorrow, more feathers will be dyed, more helmets painted, and more impromptu sabotage missions planned under moonlight. But tonight, under the hum of drying pigment and giggles echoing off the hills, you sense a soft unity threading through all the mockery and color. You stand there for a long moment, breathing in the berry temps and salty breeze, thinking that there might never be a sight quite as fierce, funny, and fiercely human as a yard full of warrior artists arguing over helmet feathers at breakfast. The paint fumes still swirl around your head as you drift away from the helmet decorating chaos, your tunic now boasting enough streaks to qualify as abstract art. You wipe your hands and glance up to see a row of Shieldmaidens, gathering near the training field again, this time, for the ultimate event, the mock battle. You shuffle over, catching snippets of plans whispered urgently. We'll flank left with the Goosefeather squad. Don't forget to insult her helmet shimmer at the second charge, and remember to grab the mead after you land your third fake blow. You feel your stomach tighten with excited dread. You're about to be roped in, aren't you? Sure enough, a hand grabs your elbow and drags you into the forming line. A helmet still slightly tacky with fresh moonlit paint swirls is plopped onto your head. A shield is shoved into your hands, and a wooden sword bounces against your knee. You look down at yourself, a strange hybrid of canvas, berry bush, and part-time warrior. Historians still argue whether these mock battles served as actual training, or if they were elaborate social performances meant to test wit and spirit more than pure combat skill. Judging by the twinkle in everyone's eyes, you suspect both. A horn sounds, echoing across the field, and you're suddenly moving forward with the line, feet thumping in rhythm, feathers bouncing wildly above heads like carnival floats in a rainstorm. Ahead of you, a warrior spins dramatically, her helmet plume slicing the air like a stage prop, then points her sword directly at an opponent and shouts, "Your feather looks like a wet goose after a thunderstorm." A collective gasp rolls across the field, followed immediately by raucous laughter. You double over, nearly dropping your shield. Another warrior claps her helmet, staggering backward in a comical feint, her feather trembling as though it, too, is offended. You stagger forward into the fray, ducking an exaggerated swing, then tapping a rival lightly on the side. She spins, plants her sword in the ground like a flag, and yells, "Impossible. You can't defeat someone with owl feathers blessed by 3 moonlit goats." You snort so hard your helmet slides over your eyes, and you're forced to readjust. While giggling helplessly nearby, 2 warriors lock shields, yelling increasingly ridiculous feather insults. One shouts, "At least my feather doesn't look like it was chewed by a hungry cow." The other retorts, "Oh please, yours looks like it was donated by a molting scarecrow." Historians still argue whether such humor-laced battles were spontaneous, or carefully scripted displays. Watching these hilarious antics, you're convinced they came from an unfiltered place, raw, honest, and chaotic, in the best possible way. You try to duck behind a nearby ally for cover, but she grabs you and shoves you forward, yelling, "Go! Use your bear-smeared blade of destiny." You lurch forward, tripping over a stray shield and tumbling into a warrior with a massive crimson feather. The 2 of you collapse into a giggling heap, feathers tangled and helmets clanging like kitchen pots at a midnight festival. You yourself, gasping for breath, feeling warmth flood your chest despite the brisk breeze. You watch warriors chase each other in circles, tapping helmets, tossing feather tufts into the air like confetti. One warrior gets her plume stolen mid-charge and runs after her opponent, howling like a wolf cub denied a bedtime snack. You stand, again, adjusting your helmet, and decide to take a dramatic leap forward. You swing your wooden sword and shout, "By Odin's left slipper, surrender your feather." Your opponent gasps, then collapses to the ground, arms splayed, helmet feather sticking up like a lone victorious flag. You raise your shield in mock triumph, nearly choking from laughter. Somewhere to the side, a warrior begins a chant, "Feathers forever, feathers forever." Others join, and soon the entire field is echoing with it, voices rising like a wild, hilarious wave. You can't help but join in, your voice rough and bright. A shared howl into the wind. Historians still argue whether these chants were serious battle calls or just gleeful nonsense born from mead and moonlight. You decide it doesn't matter. They're real in this moment, echoing off your bones and rattling around in your head, like happy echoes from another world. As the final feather duel winds down, warriors collapse in clusters on the grass, breathless and red-faced. You flop down too, helmet askew, your feather lolling to the side like a sleepy bird. You feel the thrum of your heartbeat against the soft earth, every muscle humming with the silly, electric joy of play. You look around, and see warriors passing skins of mead, sharing mock complaints about dishonorable moves and the scandalous feather theft of the century. You laugh until your ribs hurt, until the sky itself seems to shimmer in rhythm with the echoes of your cackling. Tomorrow, the feathers will be repaired, more mock battles planned, and new insults carefully crafted. But tonight, lying there in a pile of warmth, grass, and echoing chants, you feel the strong, gentle thread of sisterhood pulling everyone together like a braid of fate. You roll over on the soft grass, helmet sliding forward so far that it nearly covers your nose. You shove it back with a clumsy laugh, the movement setting your battered feather quivering like a startled squirrel. Around you, the warriors begin to gather themselves into a slow, messy sprawl toward the longhouse, shoulders brushing and braids flopping as they lean on each other for support. A small bonfire crackles to life in the yard, its smoke curling into the twilight sky like a lazy dragon sigh. You wander over, drawn by the warmth and the scent of roasted barley cakes. Someone sneaked out from the kitchen. A warrior thrusts a cake into your hand without ceremony, then collapses next to you, her painted helmet plopped onto her lap like a contented cat. Historians still argue whether evening feasts and songs after training were formal rituals or simply excuses to eat extra cake and laugh until sunrise. You watch crumbs scatter as warriors break into giggles, and you lean toward the latter explanation. Plus, who could blame them? Someone starts humming a low melodic tune, soft and droning like distant waves against a fjord. Others slowly join in, braiding voices together in a gentle chorus. You close your eyes, feeling the rhythm vibrate through your chest, as if your bones themselves are humming along. The warmth of the fire licks at your fingers, and for a moment, it feels as if the entire universe has shrunk to this small circle of voices, smoke, and flickering shadows. A warrior, across from you, claps suddenly, breaking the quiet, and proposes a new round of dares. You brace yourself. These dares usually end in some combination of embarrassment, creative insults, and stories that haunt you lovingly for weeks. The first dare is simple. Recite an insult about helmet feathers while balancing a barley cake on your head. You volunteer immediately, because clearly, you've lost control of your life. You stand, place the sticky cake on your helmet, and deliver in your most serious battle voice. Your feather looks like it was blessed by a goose that forgot how to be majestic. The cake slides precariously, but you steady it just in time to finish with a theatrical bow. The group erupts into cheers, cackles, and cake crumbs flying through the air. Another warrior stands to counter. At least my feather doesn't look like a molting mop left in the rain. Her cake slips halfway through, landing in the lap of an unsuspecting bystander who shrieks in delight and tosses it straight into the fire. Historians still argue whether such playful public shaming rituals were methods of forging tight bonds, or simply a chance to let off steam after rigid training. You suspect they were equal parts both a sacred rite of vulnerability, wrapped in sticky cakes, and ridiculous bravado. Next, a warrior is dared to sneak up and steal a rival's helmet feather while singing a love ballad to Odin's left eyebrow. She crawls around the fire pit like a mischievous fox, whisper singing a surprisingly romantic ode to divine facial hair. She lunges, grabs the feather, and sprints around the circle as her target shrieks and gives chase. You fall over laughing, your whole body convulsing as tears slip down your cheeks, one by one. The dares grow wilder, creating interpretive dances inspired by raven flight paths, crafting impromptu poems about helmet shine, and attempting to whistle the mead song of victory using only nose breaths. You join in each challenge, your voice raw from laughter and your belly sore from too many barley cakes. As the fire crackles lower, the dares soften, and the warriors sink into gentle song again. Someone strums a simple lyre melody, the strings echoing across the darkening field. You close your eyes, the tune weaving through your mind like a soft river current, pulling you deeper and deeper into calm. Historians still argue whether these evening gatherings were rehearsed or purely spontaneous. Here, surrounded by helmet feather pranksters and mead philosophers, you feel that it doesn't really matter. What matters is the shared warmth, the freedom to be silly and fierce in equal measure. You lean back, using your helmet as a pillow, staring at the stars gathering above like watchful eyes. The smoke rises slowly, curling into shapes that look almost like dancing feathers if you squint. Your chest rises and falls with each breath, your mind replaying every feathery insult and every cackle of the night. You feel the first gentle tug of sleep pulling at the edge of your thoughts, like soft waves tugging at a drifting boat. Let out a final, quiet laugh, the sound more sigh than sound now. Around you, the last voices begin to drift off to some mumbling half-finished jokes, others humming lullaby fragments to the moon, and in this slow, tender hush, you surrender to the dream tide, feathered helmet at your side and a goofy grin still echoing in your heart. Now, as you lie there with your eyes heavy and your breath soft, you feel the last warmth of the fire melting into the earth beneath you. The glow flickers and fades, each spark floating upward like a tiny lantern drifting toward the stars. The chatter has dwindled into a sweet, low hum, as if the whole yard is breathing together in one gentle lullaby. You imagine your helmet feather settling beside you, no longer bristling with battle boasts, but quiet, like a loyal friend who finally sits down after a long day. Your body feels weightless, each limb sinking deeper into the mossy ground. Your heartbeats slowing to the hush of a midnight sea. Your thoughts drift to distant fjords, quiet waves lapping at dark shores, and the cool moonlight resting lightly on your shoulders like a feathered cloak in the background. You hear faint echoes of laughter, those silly insults and buried challenges still dancing on the breeze. But here, they no longer rouse your energy. They soothe you, becoming whispers that fade into dreams. Each breath you take feels like a wave rolling in and out, gentle and rhythmic, carrying you further from the day's lively battles and closer to the stillness of sleep. You feel your eyelids growing heavier with each heartbeat, every muscle releasing its grip, every feathered memory softening into twilight. Now, in this final hush, let go completely. Let the warmth cradle you, let the night wrap around you like a gentle shield. The feathers, the laughter, the moon, they'll all be waiting when you wake. Sleep well, wanderer. The saga continues tomorrow. End of script. Sweet dreams. The last note from the lyre still echoes faintly as you stir, eyelids heavy but curiosity pulling you back up. You sit, blinking at the faint glow of the dying fire, and notice a few determined warriors still awake, huddled in a corner of the yard. You shuffle over, helmet under your arm, each step soft on the dewy grass dot as you approach. You see they're all bent over scraps of leather, tiny bone needles, and baskets of feathers. The moonlit feather crafting session has begun. One warrior looks up, eyes bright with mischief, and waves you in. Couldn't sleep. Come join our secret art hour, she whispers, as if sharing a plot to steal Odin's mead stash. You settle in, accepting a small bundle of feathers, some dyed deep, berry purple, others shimmering like raven wings. A jar of fish glue is pushed toward you. It smells so potent you nearly gag before laughing. You dip a feather delicately, trying not to glue your own fingers together on the first attempt. Historians still argue whether these moonlit crafting circles were acts of ritual devotion or just late-night bonding disguised as strategy meetings. Watching the quiet concentration and hearing the occasional snort of laughter, you think they're both soft spells and silly secrets stitched together under the stars. A warrior next to you carefully layers her feathers, explaining that she's crafting a special storm plume to wear during the next mock battle. It's for intimidation, she insists. Though you catch her practicing mock glares and her polished shield when she thinks no one is looking. Another warrior next to you struggles with a particularly large, stubborn feather that keeps flopping to one side. She curses under her breath, threatens it with a small knife, then bursts into giggles when it droops even more defiantly. You lean over, help brace it in place, and she squeezes your wrist in thanks, eyes crinkling with mischief. Someone from the far side of the circle starts humming again, a low, sweet melody that wraps around your shoulders like a warm cloak. You find yourself rocking slightly to the rhythm, threading feathers, wiping glue off your nose, and breathing in the thick scent of fish glue and damp moss. Historians still debate whether the intricate designs woven into these feather pieces held deeper meanings, messages to ancestors, love notes to distant warriors, or simply declarations of personal style. You listen to the quiet, watch the hands around you moving like gentle dancers, and feel certain that each plume is a love letter to life itself, messy, funny, and endlessly brave. Your own hands move with surprising ease now, layering bright feathers against a strip of leather, adding a few shells for sparkle. You pause to admire it, tilting it in the moonlight. One warrior leans in, gasps dramatically, and whispers, "I would raid 10 villages for that style." You both collapse into quiet laughter, nearly tipping over a bowl of spare glue. Across the circle, someone starts telling a ridiculous story about a helmet feather that once scared off an entire herd of goats, leaving them convinced they'd been visited by a moon spirit. Another warrior insists she saw a rival's feather summon lightning during last year's festival, which, to be fair, might have just been a particularly loud thunderclap at an unfortunate moment. As you finish your feather piece, you feel a softness settle over your chest, a deep hush beneath the silliness and glue mishaps. You hold your creation up to the moon, imagining her peering down, eyes bright with cosmic curiosity. You imagine her nodding approvingly, maybe even letting out a tiny giggle at your lopsided shells. The final stitches and knots are tied off slowly, lovingly, as if each warrior is tucking a small blessing into every loop. You set your piece aside, laying it carefully on a flat stone to dry. Around you, yawns ripple through the circle like a gentle tide. One by one, warriors lean against each other, heads drooping onto shoulders. Fingers finally still after a night of playful, moonlit magic. You lean back, resting on your palms, eyes tracing the constellations now fully revealed above. You feel every breath in your lungs echo the quiet strength of the group beside you, every heartbeat sinking to the soft hush of the yard. In that moment, under the moon's watchful gaze, you realize this. Each helmet feather, each silly prank, each lovingly glued plume, they're all small acts of courage, pieces of identity woven into a shared saga. Each night's laughter another stitch in an endless tapestry. You close your eyes. Let the moonlight wash over your face, and feel your chest open, lighter than it's been all day. You let out a slow, exhale, the last giggles fading into a dreamy, honey-warm silence. Dawn teases the horizon with soft streaks of pale pink and muted gold as you finally stir from your moonlit feather trance. Around you, warriors are already starting to wake, some stretching like lazy cats, others blinking at their half-finished feather pieces still drying on nearby stones. You rub your eyes and realize that your fingers are still slightly sticky from fish glue, the smell lingering like an odd badge of honor. You stand slowly, your joints creaking after a long night of crafting and giggles, and glance toward the main path that winds through the village. A sudden flurry of activity catches your eye. Shield maidens hustling back and forth, balancing helmet plumes as if they were trays of the finest mead. You feel a familiar flutter of excitement build in your stomach. Today is parade day. Historians still argue whether these morning parades were formal warrior processions or spontaneous community morale boosts. Watching the electric anticipation ripple through the crowd, you'd guess both. After all, what better way to start the day than showing off your hard-won feathers to every neighbor and goat in a 5-mile radius? You shuffle to the edge of the path, helmet in hand, adjusting your new moonlit feather piece proudly. A warrior with a face still smudged with berry dye sidles up to you, whispering conspiratorially, "Remember, walk slow and tilt your head at the end for maximum swoosh." You give her a mock salute, cheeks aching from your grin. A horn sounds somewhere near the longhouse, low and resonant like a sleepy bear yawning. The first warriors step forward, helmets bobbing with each careful, deliberate stride. The feathers sway dramatically, some brushing chins, others flaring like peacock fans catching the first blush of dawn. You fall into line, heart beating wildly as your feet crunch over the frosted earth. Spectators, elders, children, half-asleep dogs line the edges of the path. Eyes widen and small hands clap excitedly as each warrior passes, some gasping audibly at particularly outrageous plumes. You watch a goat bolt away in terror when it catches sight of a towering purple feather nearly as tall as its own horns. Historians still argue whether feathers were meant to symbolize personal victories, divine favor, or simply serve as moving works of art. Marching now, you sense each helmet is a living poem, some fierce and sharp, others playful and bright as spring blooms. The warrior in front of you strikes a dramatic turn at a corner, flicking her braid and tilting her helmet just enough to make her feathers ripple like a breaking wave. The crowd erupts into cheers. You take a deep breath, copy her motion, tilt, slow step, hold, and the onlookers let out an approving oath that fills your chest with warm, fizzy pride. Beside you, a warrior with a helmet rimmed in delicate seashell charms waves regally to a group of children, her feathers glimmering with iridescent dye. The children shriek in delight, mimicking her motions with exaggerated bows and pretend sword thrusts. You catch her eyes and both of you nearly break into laughter mid-stride, barely keeping your parade faces in place. At one turn, you spot an elder warrior perched on a wooden stool, clapping so hard her hands look ready to fall off. She has no helmet today, only a simple wool hood, but her eyes glow with memories, perhaps of her own feather battles long past, or stories spun by the hearth during long winters. You keep moving, every step a gentle sway, every breath sinking with the collective heartbeat of the line. The morning air carries the faint scent of hearth smoke, damp moss, and a distant promise of warm bread. Each inhale feels like gathering 1,000 tiny feathers into your lungs. Historians still argue whether these moments were as significant as great raids or epic duels, but you, here and now, know with bone-deep certainty, this parade is a victory in its own right, over cold nights, over doubts, over everything small that tries to diminish the soul. As the line nears the end of the village path, you catch a glimpse of your own reflection in a shallow puddle, the helmet feathers halo around your head, wild and shining. For a brief moment, you don't see just a warrior. You see all the laughter, all the whispers, every silly dare, each tear and every moonlit stitch gathered into this crown. You hold that image close as you take the final turn. The crowd's cheers softening into a sweet, rippling applause. Your heart swells, your chest feels lighter than it has in moons, and a new warmth pools at the base of your throat, a gentle, triumphant hush that wraps around you like a fur cloak. Tomorrow, the feathers might be readied, plucked, or swapped again. But today, you stand in the golden dawn with your sisters, shimmering and unbowed, and you know no saga could capture the quiet perfection of this shared, feathered sunrise. The morning parade begins to break apart, warriors drifting off in small clusters like bright feathered birds finding new branches to perch on. You shuffle away from the path, heart still drumming with the echo of cheers and the secret thunder of your own quiet pride. Nearby, a few warriors lounge in the grass, helmets placed carefully beside them like trusted old friends. You sink down with a sigh, crossing your legs and running your fingers through the damp, sweet-smelling earth. One warrior tosses her helmet up, catching it lazily as she giggles about nearly tripping over a goose mid-parade. Another is meticulously rebraiding her hair, weaving in small broken feather tips, like soft trophies from a victory, unknown to any saga. Historians still argue whether these quiet moments after displays were meant for reflection or merely for resting sore feet and heavy heads. Watching them now, you sense it's both a sacred pause between breaths of a long, endless story. A warrior next to you lifts her helmet, cradling it as though it holds the ocean's deepest secrets. "This feather," she says softly, "came from my mother's first helmet." You watch as her fingers trace each dye line, each shell bead, every tiny rune scratched lovingly into the rim. You nod, feeling your throat tighten with the gentle weight of shared legacy. You set your own helmet in your lap, turning it slowly, your eyes lingering on the shimmering feather you crafted by moonlight. You think of every giggle, every dare, each whispered confession in the dark. You remember how it felt to nearly glue your own fingers shut, how your arms ached from holding still, and the soft hush that came when you all paused to listen to a warrior's song float into the moonlight. A breeze rolls through, rustling the feather tips like 1,000 tiny voices. You close your eyes, breathing it in, letting your chest rise and fall like a quiet tide. Somewhere behind you, someone starts humming a lullaby, the same tune that drifted around the crafting circle last night. You feel its warmth brush against your skin, gentle as a friend's hand on your shoulder. Historians still argue whether helmet feathers were meant as messages to the gods or simply bright beacons to each other. You think it doesn't matter? Each feather is a love note. To the self, to the sisters beside you, to the shimmering unknown that waits beyond every fjord and every dawn. Your mind drifts lazily to tomorrow. More helmet debates, more daring, paint experiments, maybe a spontaneous feather duel near the stream. You imagine your moonlit feather sailing through the air, landing in a pile of giggling warriors. You imagine bending down to retrieve it, only to find someone else's tucked alongside, and the two of you collapsing in shared, helpless laughter. Your eyelids grow heavy as the breeze wraps you tighter, a gentle shroud of moss and salt air. You lie back, helmet resting on your chest, feather quivering with each slow breath. The sky above blurs into a soft watercolor wash, the sun's pale warmth brushing against your cheeks like an old friend's whisper. Around you, voices melt into murmurs, laughter fades into sleepy sighs, and the world slows to the tender hush of a final heartbeat before a dream. You let go of today's colors, the sounds of painted helmets tapping and greeting, the smell of fish, glue and berry dye tangled in your hair. You let them all drift into the gentle pool of your mind, to be stitched into dreams as bright and silly, and strong as any morning parade. Your last thought drifts like a floating feather, that there is no helmet strong enough to contain the softness of a heart that dares to laugh, to fight, to paint, to dance at dawn. You exhale, your body sinking deeper into the earth's cradle, your spirit already soaring above with each whispering plume. Now, as the last notes of the morning drift away, you feel your breath soften, each inhale deeper, slower, sweeter. The feather resting on your chest rises and falls with you, like a small, gentle guardian reminding you that even warriors need to surrender to softness sometimes. The cool breeze wraps around your cheeks, a delicate hush brushing away the echoes of laughter and the swirl of morning parades. You feel your shoulders relax, your jaw unclench, the last traces of mead-fueled giggles dissolving into the misty edges of sleep. Your thoughts flutter lazily, no longer sharp or fast, but floating like pale feathers in the dawn light. You remember the shimmer of helmet paints, the warmth of moonlit crafts, the echo of chants rolling across the field, all of it weaving into a soft tapestry that hums gently inside your chest. With every breath, you feel the warmth spread deeper, like a slow wave washing over tired muscles and carrying away the day's bright chatter. Your arms grow heavy, your legs sink into the earth, and your mind drifts toward the soft edge of dreams. Above you, the sky stretches wide and forgiving, a quiet witness to your surrender. You imagine the moon peeking through the morning veil, smiling knowingly at your feathered heart. Now, release each stray thought. Let the images blur into gentle shapes. Let the sounds melt into a sweet, comforting hush. Trust that the feathers, the jokes, the rivalries, they will all be waiting for you tomorrow, brighter and sillier than ever. Tonight, you are safe. You are held. You are more than your helmet, more than your bravado. You are a quiet, glowing echo wrapped in moss and moonlight. Let go now. Sink deeper. Drift. End of script. Sweet dreams.